Literally every time I speak, the cicadas start to go crazy. See? Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Anna. I am a full-time editor and indie author. I have one book published and I'm currently working on its sequel. This is one of my favorite places to go. It's just absolutely beautiful. I thought it would be fun to bust out the next book that is on my TBR, and that is Babel. I've had so many people recommend this book to me, you guys. I'm so excited to dive into it. I finished Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler yesterday, and it was so good. It definitely busted me out of the reading rut that I've been in, so I'm eager to continue reading. I think reading regularly is a really important part of my writer hygiene. If I do not keep up on reading, then I tend to lapse into creative ruts more often. I definitely went through a phase there where I was like, I'm just more of a writer than I am a reader, and that's okay too. I think we all kind of vacillate in and out of reading consistently, but I definitely have noticed if I read consistently, I write consistently. Somebody was literally just lurking behind me, and that was the most off-putting thing. I saw them in the viewfinder and I was like, excuse me? Anyway, with that being said, my battery is about to die, so I'm gonna dive into a little bit of B-roll of just enjoying my morning, reading a little bit of Babel by the creek. Like, does it get better? I was going to bring an iced coffee, but I already had a quad shot, so I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm like going a million miles a minute right now. So I stayed safe and decided to go with a strawberry Waterloo. The sound of success. I'm not gonna lie, it is way too hot to be wearing this sweater right now, but maybe the iced coffee will offset it. I don't know. Anyway, it's obviously another day. I thought I would take a moment to sit down and talk to you guys a little bit about something that is rapidly becoming a theme of today's video, and that is creative hygiene. Creative hygiene for me is a lot like, well, I guess it was kind of inspired by sleep hygiene. I have struggled with sleep my entire life. I've been a chronic insomniac for my entire life. And so I have been very rigid about sleep hygiene for very many years. Examples of sleep hygiene are things like don't expose yourself to blue light before bed, go to bed at the same time every single night, make sure you're sleeping in a dark, quiet, cool environment. The whole philosophy behind this hygiene, and any hygiene really, is just going through rituals that will set you up for success. I am unfortunately the kind of writer who takes a good 30 minutes just to get back into the story. So if I only have an hour to write, then that means I'm wasting probably 30 minutes, sometimes longer, just refamiliarizing myself with the book, submerging myself in the story and the character's voice and the trajectory of the plot, all of those moving parts. One day it just sort of popped into my mind that I should probably exercise better creative hygiene and sort of curate an environment that was more conducive to writing and which might help me submerge myself in the story a little more quickly. And lo and behold, it has helped a lot. I don't know why I'm shocked. The things that I do to set myself up for like an ambient environment is just It's a lot. It's probably a lot for most people, but for me, it's perfect. I'm somebody who is also relatively big into meditation, and I started to think about how, what is writing if not another form of meditation? My very best writing is produced when I forget who I am, when the cafe that I'm writing in suddenly disappears, and when all of a sudden I've forgotten that I've ordered a coffee, and that I'm on a deadline, and that I've got a time limit, and I am Anna. Suddenly I'm so engrossed in the narrative that everything about my reality fades away, and everything about the story starts to feel more like my actual reality. That is when the good writing starts to happen. But I've noticed, without some creative hygiene, I tend to just sort of write and go through the motions. Like, I'm more aware of the fact that I'm sitting at a computer and I'm plucking away at the keyboard and I want to write this scene before the end of the day. These things curate decent writing, but not my best writing. So, like I said, I've been into meditation for quite a long time. I've started to realize my best writing is produced when I'm almost in that meditative state as I'm writing. So why not treat my creative hygiene and my creative writing practice the same way I would my meditation practice? The reason that I make these specifications is I think that I have now officially gone above and beyond what is just typical hygiene, and now I'm officially in the territory of like ritual. For example, I have used ceremonial grade cacao to facilitate my meditation process for years, and I decided to give that a try for my writing. It is great to have right before you dive into a creative session of any kind. I know that we all struggle with that issue where we don't even want to write unless our entire house is cleaned, until all of the chores are done. I'm convinced that the root cause of that impulse is we need to free up our subconscious mind in order to create more real estate for creation. I have realized that if my subconscious mind is preoccupied with all of these different errands I need to be running or all of these other tasks that I need to see to, I am inadvertently blocking my own creative flow. So I think part of curating a nice, clean, and aesthetic environment for me is just freeing up that subconscious mind and making more room for that creative energy to flow. I'm starting to sound very woo-woo. I gotta get a sip of this coffee. It really is amazing that if I keep a clean, aesthetic environment, I'm more excited to write. Ultimately, the message I think right now is that we can all sit down and force ourselves to write, but what is the quality of our creative output when we're doing that? Are we writing to our best abilities? Are we setting ourselves up for success? about why I chose to self-publish. Like I said earlier, I only have one book published, but that book was intended to be traditionally published. And I had written it way back in 2015. This is something that not a lot of people know because I very quietly published it. I ended up having a huge life crisis like immediately afterward, and so I pulled the book off shelves for 2 years, and then I republished it with a new cover in 2017, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Like I said, I had originally wanted to traditionally publish this book, and so I had gone through the motions of starting to explore and research literary agents. I just had gotten on to Twitter. At this point in time, it was sort of like the place to be for authors, but I didn't know anything about Twitter. I think it was the second day that I was on Twitter that I heard about a contest called PitMad, and it was a Twitter pitch contest. At that point, I think I was like halfway through the draft of When Stars Burn Out, and I thought, that's cool. I could use some critique on my elevator pitch for the book. I will post a pitch. So I posted a pitch, and lo and behold, I actually got some engagement. However, when agents were suddenly contacting me and asking me for a full manuscript, I was like, I thought that the pitch contest was all about you posted your pitch and you would receive critique and feedback on your elevator pitch. I didn't realize that I was literally pitching my book to agents on Twitter. So I started to look through all of the agents who had requested either the first chapter, I had some partials, I had 2 full requests from agents, and I looked into them because I was like, my book isn't done, and I don't know how catastrophic this is yet, but let's find out. Lo and behold, one of the agents who had made a full manuscript request for When Stars Burn Out was a literary agent that I had researched and desperately wanted to work with. I knew, based off of my research, that she wasn't open to queries, which meant she was only open to the queries that she personally solicited, such as the one that she had solicited from me. I panicked because it wasn't like I could just postpone sending her the manuscript. She was closed to queries. So I decided to just be honest, and I told her straight up,
I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what PitMad was. I thought that I was just pitching to pitch. I didn't realize that I was literally pitching a completed book, which my book is not completed.
Thankfully, she responded and was like, that's fine. I'm interested. Please send me the full manuscript once it is completed. And I said, cool. It did take me 8 months. She read the manuscript, she said she enjoyed my writing, she enjoyed the story, the concept was unique, but the sci-fi books that she was already representing weren't selling. This became a significant theme for my query trenches journey, and I didn't realize it at the time, but yeah. I proceeded to start querying other agents. I actually got into dialogue with my other top agent that I would have loved to work with, possibly even more top than the other one. That's not making sense. Anyway, she and I ended up having a dialogue, and I've saved these emails to this day because they just bring me hope. She and I ended up engaging in some back and forth correspondence over email, throughout which she said, I like your story idea, I love your writing. She complimented me and said that there was no doubt in her mind I would eventually be published, but she gave me the same conclusion that the previous agent had, which was that sci-fi wasn't selling, which is really upsetting because had I actually had When Stars Burn Out completed by the time I had pitched it on Twitter, this entire story could have been very different. If you don't remember, 2010 to 2013 was like peak dystopian era. It was all about post-apoc, sci-fi, dystopia, The Maze Runner, Hunger Games, Divergent. All of these books were so huge, and my book fell right into that niche. But of course, trends in publishing change eventually, and sci-fi fizzled out. I had effectively missed the boat, which was a tough pill to swallow. So I did continue to query. I just thought maybe I'll find somebody. I didn't. I stopped querying at 32 queries, which to me in retrospect is not a lot. I probably should have kept going. But I stopped because at that point I had heard about a new contest on Twitter that was called Pitch Wars. And Pitch Wars was all about getting help from an established author, a traditionally published author who would mentor you through critiquing and revising your manuscript and polishing it and then presenting it to a panel of agents at the end of like a 2-month period or something like that. So I thought this seems like an excellent chance to get my book out of the slush pile and in front of a panel of agents and also get a ton of feedback from a traditionally published author who is very familiar with the industry. Naive little me went into it thinking, oh, this will be fun, maybe I'll stand a chance. But after I submitted, I quickly learned that over 3,000 other people had submitted their manuscript and there were only 35 spots. However, shockingly, When Stars Burn Out was selected. So I officially landed myself a mentor. My book was in pitch wars and I was feeling so good about all of this. It was just honestly such a highlight of my entire publishing experience and I felt so uplifted. But we all know how this story ends because my book is not traditionally published right now. By the time I had finished polishing the manuscript and getting my pitch ready and getting everything together for the panel of agents, my mentor and I scheduled a call. She gave me the honest truth, which was that sci-fi wasn't selling. And she was like, I don't want you to be disappointed. I really believe in it. I believe in the story. I believe in you as an author and I love your writing style. But we're talking about a business and businesses don't want to sell a product that isn't going to sell easily. I had unfortunately lost that commercial appeal and sort of like publishing a book about vampires after Twilight. People were just sick of it. It was like when Paranormal Romance fizzled out and all of a sudden nobody wanted to read it anymore. And so I was like, I braced for impact. The next day I did get a couple of requests from agents, so at least I didn't get publicly humiliated. However, obviously nothing came of it. They all concluded the same thing, like this is great, this is a unique take. But because When Stars Burn Out, and if you've read the book, you'll realize this, it is different than other books that are zombie apocalypse, that kind of an energy. But I can't tell you how it's different because that will spoil the entire book. At this point, my mentor revealed to me that she was a successful hybrid author. So not only was she traditionally published, but she was also self-published. And she took me aside and was like, you need to self-publish this. At this point, I had also met one of my best friends, Ashley, and she was successfully self-publishing. One of the first people that I'd ever known who really was self-publishing a quality product. She had hired professional cover designers, interior formatters, like she'd really done the job right. So at the very moment that I had met Ashley, realized, hey, this is how you can self-publish the right way. I also had my mentor, Trisha, who was like, you need to consider this. And I did. And I didn't look back. And I actually ended up loving the process, I think, more than I ever would have loved traditionally publishing. And that is because this specific story is just so special to me and I'm not interested in changing anything about it. When you get an agent, you often revise your book to appeal to that agent and what they think is going to sell. After you go out on sub, your book goes through the acquisitions department and it's acquired by an editor. That is when you end up revising again and sometimes significantly. Like I said, I ended up quietly self-publishing in November 2015, had a life crisis, pulled the book off shelves. I republished it correctly with a new cover in 2017. And that was really when I started to gain some traction, but obviously not a lot because the sequel isn't out. Right now, I can say with such confidence that self-publishing is just a better fit for me. I love having full creative liberty over the output of what I am creating. I don't want to change anything about my books that I don't want to. I've heard a lot of people say that if you want to self-publish, you need to have CEO energy, but if you want to traditionally publish, then you need to have employee energy. And I feel like I'm a little reluctant to phrase it that way, but I get the root of that mentality. You're not just an author when you self-publish, you are also a publisher, which is probably why my book isn't selling very well. Anyway, I will obviously be self-publishing the sequel and the rest of the books in this series, but I do have a series that I talked about in my last video that is fantasy. So I'm thinking about possibly querying that one. We'll see. It depends on how nitpicky I get about what I'm willing to change and what I'm not willing to change about the book. I can't look you in the eye and tell you that I'm like an expert in self-publishing. I certainly am not. A lot of my friends are actual experts in self-publishing, so I siphon information from them. Thank God for them. But for now, I just thought I would talk a little bit about the journey that got me here because it's kind of a unique one. It's kind of not a unique one at the same time. I think many of us, especially those of us who self-published back in 2015 before it was so big, we ended up there because we didn't want to be there. And we were just hoping to get our books into the world, and that was all that we really cared about. But now that we're here, I can say that the friends that I have who are self-publishing are very, very happy to be self-publishing. When you self-publish, your books are alive forever. They're immortal. You could have a book that you wrote 10 years ago suddenly go viral today and pay you good money, whereas if you were traditionally published, that book would have been pulled off shelves years ago and it wouldn't stand any chance in today's market. I think in some ways it really is just a numbers game. Having a bigger backlog of books and having a wider range of books is just you casting a wide net. You're gonna ensnare new readers a little more easily than the traditionally published author does, who has a book that comes out and they have to make sure that it sells really, really well within the first week that it's published. It's a whole thing. I don't want to bash one direction or the other. I personally would love to be a hybrid author someday. My ideal scenario would be to have my self-published books somehow go viral and then be picked up by a publisher. And because I already self-published, I would then have a little more control over the contract with my new publisher, my traditional publisher. But getting ahead of ourselves here because I only have one book out.